Hey there, folks. Welcome to a fresh hour of HQ Midday. We start the show 4 wide all the way to the end. Pete Prisco, Danny Kanell, Jacqueline Agostino, and I'm Tommy Tran, where we're talking football, Jack, and we've got Pete Prisco on set.
Yeah, because we're talking about your top 100 free agents, Pete, and we know free agency is important. We saw what the Patriots did a season ago, and that feels like that's kind of like the exception, maybe not the rule, Pete, but we're going to go through your top 100 free agents. We're going to do every single one. No, I'm just kidding. We're going to kind of summarize.
That's probably coming some year, by the way.
Yeah.
It's going to be like an all-day marathon, though. It would be just this.
Work for once.
Don't put out any ideas, because you say that, Pete, and I'm going to speak it into existence. So we're going to kind of group some guys here, by the numbers, and we're going to pick out a few. So starting with 91 through 100, we're starting at the bottom half of this list, and want to get to some NFC South backup running backs, Pete. Before we get into this, though, how difficult is it to put this list together?
It's hard. It's tough to do, in large part because you're kind of balancing age against guys who have played and been good players, but they're getting up in the years.
Yeah.
So you got to be careful. Free agency, the number that you target is 26. That's the age you want, 26, 27. You'll pay those guys big money deals. When you get into the 30s and you start paying those big money deals, you're probably not going to get to the end of them. So it makes it kind of challenging on where to stack these guys.
That was the thing that jumped out to me was some of the age, guys in their late 30s who have played on multiple teams, but they're big names who've had very productive careers. What do you value them? And then the other thing that jumped out to me, I'm always going to check out the QBs. It is not a year you want to be looking for a quarterback in the free agent market. That jumped out to me big time.
Yeah, before we get to any quarterbacks, there's a lot of guys that are 35, 36, and we're going to talk about them first, or up first, to your point. Let's get back to the running backs in the NFC South. We have Rachaad White, Tyler Algier, who are going to hit the open market, Pete.
Yeah, and again, both guys are backups. And the way teams run the football now, you want a couple of guys. And Rachaad White's a nice backup he's good in blitz protection, so that's important on third down. And I think Algier's a nice change of pace back. Neither one of these guys are number one running backs in my mind. But the way teams run the football, there's value in having a guy like that as a backup.
I thought both of these guys were almost interchangeable. Tyler Algier did have a 1,000-yard rookie season, but then they've been kind of both in that range where they're going to give you 500, 600 yards, 4 yards per carry. They're sort of your workhorses. And these guys are really important when you're building a roster because if you do have an injury, if somebody does go down, you need somebody that knows the system, that you can get productivity of. But neither one of them are breakaway type guys that you feel like, oh, these are going to be the featured ball carrier for you. But they're very critical components to any roster, wherever they end up.
In the fantasy football world, they're great handcuffs. They're great guys that if those number ones get hurt, you can fill them in. Can also get you some flex opportunities as well. So that's a look at 100 through 91. Let's go further down the list and go 90 to 81. We're taking a look at the next round of guys here. And 89 has Matt Milano, Pete. And you were just talking about how you had to sort of balance age and ability and expectation. Why does Milano crack the top 90, but some would argue that he might be higher or should be lower on the list?
No, I don't think he should be higher. I think injuries have really impacted him in the last couple of years. He's not the same player. He's not a bad player. He's a good, solid player. But he used to be one of those guys you can count on down in and down out. And I don't know if he's that guy anymore. You might get a year or two out of him if he's healthy. I just think that the long-term approach with him is probably not the way to go.
I think this is one where there's a couple things that come into play, like what type of guarantee are you going to give him because of some of those injuries? So at what cost? And then your medical staff, like the medical evaluation, looking at those trends and the history of injuries, how much can you trust them? Because this is one of those ones where if you do get the best version of the player, it could be a great signing, but I do think it comes with a pretty high risk reward.
Yeah, and I don't think when he came back last year, he was quite the same player. So that's always concerning when a guy gets up in age.
Also in the same group at number 82, we have Rico Dowdle, who was a decent back the last 2 years, whether it be in Dallas and Carolina. Could he be a number one back somewhere, Pete?
No, I don't think he's a number one back. I think, for example, if like a team like Jacksonville were, if they didn't get ETN, maybe Rico Dowdle would make sense as the guy who could come in and split carries or get carries from Tootin. So I think that's the way you're going to look at Rico Dowdle. To be honest with you, I don't think any of the running backs we've just mentioned are number one running backs. Okay. I think they're spot-in guys who can start a game or two, but they're not going to be your number one running back going forward.
I do think of the three, though, that we've talked about in Algier and White, I do think he comes to the – I mean, back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons for Dallas and Carolina. So I think he might argue that. His agent might argue against that, say he can be the starter back, the featured back. But I think the history would tell you maybe somebody's more of an insurance policy.
Yeah, it's interesting because I would think when he came back, Chuba Hubbard, I'm saying, was relatively healthy. Rico Dowdle still got a few games where he was the number one back. So he nearly Wally pipped Chuba for a little bit before they kind of Dave Canales recorrected and had his number one back there. Let's get to the next tier of list here when we have, 80 to 71 when we're talking about the next group of guys. And Pete, the last time we saw Travis Kelce, he was over at Pebble playing in the Pro-Am, being asked about his future with the team. I mean, what concerns of that with the former multi-Super Bowl champ?
Well, he's a free agent, but I don't think he's going anywhere. And I think if he plays, he's going to go back to Kansas City. I mean, that team is close. He's close with Patrick Mahomes. It just makes sense. And he's not Travis Kelce anymore, but he's not bad either. I mean, there's something in between that, which is what he was a year ago. He's not as sudden as he once was. He doesn't scare you down the field like he used to. But he still had a productive season last year. So I think if he plays, going back to Kansas City makes sense on a one-year deal.
Yeah, there's a couple that we're going to talk about in this category that are guys that have played with one franchise. That is a legacy move. Like you're Travis Kelce. Do you really want to go somewhere else on the back end of your career, play with some quarterback that you're not familiar with? I mean, you could still make the very strong case. He was Patrick Mahomes' favorite target this year, and that's always been the case. Like anytime they need a play, Patrick Mahomes seems to find his favorite target in number 87. So I think this is one for Travis Kelce where you don't have a lot of leverage. Because I think even Kansas City knows you're probably not going to go somewhere else. I think that's why the retirement conversation even comes up. But I think Kansas City wants to bring him back as well. So I think it just comes down to how much does he want to still play? Like, is he still have it in him? He's got a lot of opportunities off the field to make a ton of money in broadcasting with his podcast. But if he wants to come back and run it back and try to get one more Super Bowl ring, I think everybody would be happy for him.
He's going to make a ton of money this summer when he gets married.
There might be some paperwork in line there that he has to sign, because that's what happens when your girl's richer than you, We're going to talk about some Saints veterans here, Cam Jordan, Demario Davis, and Pete, this is, again, the conversation where these guys are 35, 36 respectively. So are they sticking there with the Saints, or how do you see it playing out?
Demario Davis might explore his options. I mean, Cam Jordan's different because he's been there his entire career, like you talked about, so he might stay there. But again, I think they're building to something in New Orleans. I do think Kellen Moore did a nice job last year. If Tyler Shuck is the guy, you're building to something. But then you look at that defense and you go, oh my, we've got a little old on that side of the ball. So what do? Demario Davis can still play at a high level. And Cam Jordan, by the way, bounced back with a really good season last year after a down one the year before. So they're going to be attractive to teams, but again, 1 or 2 year deal. I don't think you do anything more than that.
Agreed. I don't think they keep them both, but if they're going to keep one, I think it's Cam Jordan. And I also think this is one of those ones where it's probably a shorter term deal. 10.5 sacks this season, which I'm sure he was aware of. He was going to be a free agent. You always try to increase your value with a better year going into that contract year. So I think Cam Jordan probably more likely to stay here. Legacy move, finishing out the career with the Saints, where I do think Demario Davis might shop around.
The good thing about both of them, whoever gets them, they're pros. They've been around it. And Demario Davis, all you ever hear are people raving about him inside the building.
Yeah, and Cam Jordan already dabbling in the broadcast stuff, so whenever he's ready to call it a career full time, he should have that in his back pocket. Damon, I'll flip the script a little bit and have you go first, since we're talking about a quarterback next. Would be Aaron Rodgers during this tier of guys. Would be what, arguably third team in 3 years, and we talk about 35, 36-year-olds, and now we're talking about 42, 43-year-old Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, I think he's got one option. It's to stay at Pittsburgh. I mean, they brought in a coach for him and Mike McCarthy, so I think that makes a ton of sense. You talk about legacy moves. Like, he's already bounced around a little bit. You don't really want to start bouncing around this much. And you know what? For Pittsburgh, I think it makes a ton of sense to bring him back and get a deal figured out. There aren't many quarterbacks in the draft available. They drafted Will Howard late last year. I don't think he's the future or he's ready for that franchise. And I thought Aaron Rodgers gave you exactly what you wanted. You didn't make the playoffs. I think Pittsburgh needs to do a better job getting him some better offensive line play up front. But I think you know exactly what you're going to get. It's a chance to make the playoffs. And if you get him better protection, he still played winning football. It's been the most stable they've had at the quarterback position since Ben Roethlisberger. So I think Aaron Rodgers, really the only option that's for him is Pittsburgh.
And you're starting to hear little whispers that he might want to come back and play for Mike McCarthy in Pittsburgh. And I think it makes sense. That's the place for him to go back to. They need to get more weapons is what they need to get him. I mean, they need to get help in the passing game. The line actually started playing better as the season moved along. There were a lot of young guys on that line. They need more weapons.
So you guys don't think any situation, I only brought up third team in 3 years, Minnesota getting a little bit of buzz because of what's happening with J.J. McCarthy.
I don't think he wants to change.
Okay.
I really
No,
don't. I think
fine.
he's comfortable. He said he had the most fun he's had in a long time playing in Pittsburgh, and I think, and he knows Mike McCarthy. There's a real comfort there. So I think the two of them together would make sense.
It is crazy that a 40-something-year-old quarterback coming off of an Achilles injury is the best situation that Pittsburgh has had since Big Ben. I like scratch my head every time I think about it. Let's go to the next tier of guys. We're looking at 61 through 70 on Pete Prisco's top 100 NFL free agents, and some veteran pass rushers that are in the mix here. Back-to-back, Pete, Khalil Mack, Von Miller. What could these guys bring to a pass rush needy team that's out there?
Situational. I think that's what you want with them. I'll tell you what, if I was a team, after watching what Seattle did with running guys in bunches, I would look at both of these guys. And now the money has to be right. And Von Miller was at the Super Bowl. I talked to him, and look, Buffalo let him go. And he responded. He had a good year last year for Washington. Quietly had a good year for Washington. I think he'd like to maybe explore going back to the Broncos, even if that's a possibility. I think there's going to be a market for both these guys. They both are good football players, and they're not going to give you what they once gave you, but they can give you situational pass rush, and that's important nowadays.
This, to me, is all about the price of what you're going to have to pay for these guys, both in their mid-30s. You always kind of have visions of what could they be. Khalil Mack had 17 sacks in 2023, so it wasn't that far removed. But then he's had back-to-back seasons with 6 and 5.5 sacks, so it's kind of
banged up a little bit last year.
Yeah, banged up a little bit. Von Miller had the injury in Buffalo, but it wasn't. I think it was a disappointing tenure in Buffalo that didn't really deliver on what he wanted or Buffalo wanted. But I think you are spot on with the situational, because those guys, once they turn it on, they can absolutely get after the quarterback as many as most. But at this phase in their career, you can't rely on them to be 4-down guys.
You get 30 snaps from them, 25 snaps from them. They would be happy with that.
It's like the old Westerns, the hired guns. They get the job done. You get the grizzled veterans. You try to go get the quarterback. We'll pay you a top coin to take these guys down. Next tier of list, 60 to 51. You can see there's a couple of skill position players like Kenneth Gainwell and Cade Otton, but we're going to focus on 51, which is Deebo Samuel. Pete, we talk about age tiers. Deebo Samuel, 30 years old for wide receivers. People say that's the age where you start worrying about wide receivers, especially how much tread is left on his tires.
And he got heavy. I mean, he wasn't as fast as he was a year ago. He looked like he got a little chunky during the season, and he didn't play as well. I think there's a concern there because he never was a burner to begin with. And what is he? He's a gimmick guy. If you want to get a gimmick guy, a guy you can spot in, do a little bit of everything, that's fine. I don't know how good he is as a pure wide receiver anymore because he doesn't run that well.
I think he's similar to, some quarterbacks we talk about, you have to build a system around them. I think you have to have an offensive coordinator who can get creative with Deebo Samuel, who finds ways to utilize some of those gimmicks. Because if you can, as Kyle Shanahan showed, you can get some production out of them. But I do think it's more of a specific situation for Deebo where you find that fit where it makes some sense.
Okay, so now we're emerging into, I guess, the top half of the top 100 list, and we're going to look at 41 through 50. And as we look in here, really want to hone in on number 42, Bobby Wagner out of the Commanders. 143 tackles last season, Pete. So what could he potentially bring to a defense?
Again, he's one of those guys on a 1 or 2 year deal. He did a 1 year deal last year. I think he'll probably do another 1 year deal. He can still make plays. He just doesn't run like he used to. Back in the day, Bobby Wagner could not only play in the run game, but he would go sideline to sideline and make plays in the passing game. He's not as good in coverage as he once was, but he can still make tackles in the run game, and he's still okay in the passing game. So for a team that wants a pro's pro, this is a guy going to the Hall of Fame. He will be in the Hall of Fame. And I think for a team that wants that and a great person, I think he would make a lot of sense. I think he goes back to Washington. He likes it there, but we'll see.
I hope he goes back to Washington, too. And you said pro's pro. I was thinking of a veteran presence who really provides a ton of leadership on that side of the ball. You think of a coach who's actually playing on the field, and he plays at a really high level. The impact he had even on Jaden Daniels, who's on the other side of the ball, and the conversations they got to have and kind of helping him discover what it meant to be a pro's pro. Wherever he's at, I think it really provides some stability and leadership as far as the offseason, the midweek of practice, when things aren't going well. These are the types of players that really can add a ton of value in a locker room, regardless of the production. Maybe it's not where it once was, but you still get incredible value in the intangibles in a guy like Bobby
1 year
Wagner.
deal, though, probably. That's all he's going to
Bobby Wagner, Hall of Famer?
Yes.
Mike Evans, Hall of Famer?
Maybe down the road.
That's been long-standing Pete Prisco's take on Mike Evans, who had his 11 straight seasons of 1,000 yards snapped due to injury. So here he is coming in at 39 as we take a look at 31 through 40. Obviously, the injuries derailed his season, Pete, but the projections moving forward are what?
Well, he also came out, his agent came out and said he's going to play this year. So it didn't say he was going to play with Tampa, but he did say he was going to play. I ultimately think he goes back to Tampa. I think the options for him will be like going back to Tampa, maybe going to the Texans because he's from that area, he's from Galveston, or maybe even going to a team that wants to get over the top like Buffalo. Buffalo might explore something like that as well. He wasn't as good last year. I know the injuries impacted him, but again, I always go back to yards per catch. When a yards per catch number starts going down for an older receiver, that's a red flag to me. And in the last 2 seasons, that number has gone down for Mike Evans. So it's always concerning. I think ultimately he signs a 1 or 2 year deal, goes back to Tampa, and you talk about the legacy, retiring as a Buck.
I think so too. I think it makes sense. Him and Baker Mayfield have a really good rapport together. The yards per catch that comes down, I think you see that happen a lot as quarterbacks get older, especially if they've been injured. But I think Mike Evans is one of those ones where, sure, he's not as explosive, but the big body is something that quarterbacks like being able to throw to. It's a size mismatch, and you don't have to be as speedy as you once were sometimes. Got great hands, a huge catch radius. But I think Tampa Bay makes probably the most sense as well.
As Baker said last May, he told me, he said, look, our offense, what's it going to be under the new coordinator? They got another new coordinator, but what's it going to be? We're going to be Mike Evans in the run game. That's what we're going to be. And so that's the priorities to keep him. I think they will keep him.
Okay, yeah, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, although it was a little broke this past season for
Well, a lot of
Tampa.
people were broke on that team. They got a lot of injuries on that team.
All right, as we look for 21 through 30, we talked about ETN earlier, Pete, but right now we're going to talk about Isaiah Likely, who, his production did dip last season, but he is only 26 years old, so still a lot of football ahead of him.
And the attraction of him is getting him in mismatches. I mean, he's that kind of tight end you can flex out and create all kinds of problems. Everybody's looking to create mismatches, and we've seen the defenses counter by look at what Seattle did. They played Eamon Worry as like the linebacker hybrid safety, and so how do you counter that? You get guys like Likely. You can create problems in the middle of the field. So I do think there's going to be a pretty good market for Likely. He's not a blocking tight end. He's not going to help you in that aspect, but he's a guy you can get in the passing game who's going to create problems for a defense.
I think that's why the Ravens feel pretty good about Mark Andrews, because he's more a complete tight end who can block and make some of those plays. This one goes to me again for a coordinator who can figure out how to use Isaiah Likely. I mean, the offensive attack for the Ravens with Lamar Jackson, with Derrick Henry, and Mark Andrews did favor Isaiah Likely in getting some of those matchups. So I do think fit comes into play with somebody who can utilize his skill set and maybe overcome some of his deficiencies as a run blocker.
We're nearing the top 10, but we're not there yet here. 20 through 11. So you've got the couple running backs in Breece Hall and Ken Walker, yes, but another quarterback, Daniel Jones, Pete, in Indianapolis, dealing with that Achilles injury.
And again, the health is the issue. Remember, he also broke his leg at one point last season. He played through it, and then he had the Achilles injury. So that's always a concern. I think the Colts want him back in the worst way. If they don't have him, what do you do? Who do they play with? If Daniel Jones were to go somewhere else, and let's not forget, the Vikings wanted to keep him last year and kind of messed that up and allowed him to leave. They didn't give him enough money. He went for the opportunity to go play for the Colts. So would they want to go back and maybe make a move on him? So I think ultimately he goes back to the Colts. He's comfortable. The staff is back together. I think he becomes the quarterback of the Colts again.
I thought the Colts were such a good fit for Daniel Jones. It was the right call for him. He gets the opportunity, makes the most of it. I think you feel comfortable with the system. They got a strong running game. I think Daniel Jones does need that anywhere he's been successful, whether it was the Giants and Saquon, now with the Colts, the running game that they've had. I think this makes the most sense for him. And you want to be comfortable in the system. I know you could go back to Minnesota and run the same system, but you were a team and you were in the conversation for the MVP and you were feeling comfortable with the pieces around you. I think it makes a ton of sense for Daniel Jones to stay in Indianapolis.
All right, guys, hang tight. We have more to get to. We're going to talk about the top 10 in just a moment. But in the meantime, some upcoming NFL dates. We got the Combine coming up quickly. You heading out there? You're going to be there, right? Both of you guys. On February 26th, that franchise tag window closing March 3rd. And then, of course, the draft. We're all looking ahead to that on April 23rd. Back here on CBS Sports HQ, we are going through Pete Prisco's top 100 free agents. And now we have finally arrived at the top 10. We are going to start at 10, work our way back all the way to number 1. Tommy, you already stated George Pickens is in the mix. We'll see where, but we're talking about Gator great Kyle Pitts coming up first at number 10. I can't say Atlanta Falcons great right now, although he did have a really great season last year, and we keep waiting for, this version of the promised version of Kyle Pitts to arrive. And I feel like we got a glimpse of that, Pete. He's coming in at number 10 on your top 10 free agents.
Which makes him attractive because when a pilot light goes on for a guy, usually that means it's going to stay on for a while. And I think it went on for him. He looked like a different guy in the second half of the season. He was a mismatch problem. He could, he was getting a lot of big plays down the field, and he looked comfortable doing it. He never really looked comfortable in their offense ever after he was picked so high. Is he ever going to be the guy that lives up to that pick? Probably not. But in this free agent market, he is a guy that if teams want to get somebody in the middle of the field to create problems for defense, he's that guy.
He's one of the biggest matchup nightmares at the tight end position available in this class. That's why I agree with where you have him here. When he was coming out of Florida, I actually bought into the generational, like this could be the next great thing because he was such a physical specimen. And he did have a rookie year that was awesome, and then it was a little bit up and down, but he's played with different systems, different quarterbacks. If you can get the version of you saw last year and a little bit more, put him somewhere, I think he absolutely is going to break the bank here. Because you see that type of potential and you're like, oh, we can maximize it. So I do think it's a little bit concerning for me because of the up and down nature, but I do think the physical skill set is there where it just becomes so attractive.
Yeah, because there's always that, did he do it to get the contract?
Right.
And then he's going to go back to what he was, or did the pilot light go on?
Some guys just play good in contract years when they know they're coming up,
Yeah.
especially if you have a top 5 designation kind of hanging over your head. You mentioned how attractive Kyle Pitts would be. How attractive would a steady, good interior lineman be in Connor McGovern here from Buffalo? Guard or center, Pro Bowler 2 seasons ago, and in his late 20s, coming in at 28 years old.
Yeah, there's only so many big people who can play the game. And if we saw what New England had problems with against Seattle, you better be good up front. And a guy who has a lot of starts at center, and he's been a guard at times in his career too, there's value in that. I think the Bills will do everything they can to try and keep him, and they should. I think he's comfortable in their system. He's good with Josh Allen at the line making the calls. There's value in that, which is why I think he's going to get, if he hits the market and the Bills don't keep him, I think he's going to have a hot market.
I'll be shocked if he does hit the market. I know the Bills have work to do and they want some other positions. They want to upgrade at receiver. But if you want to keep Josh Allen happy and you want to keep him protected, I would argue that the most important position for a quarterback and the relationship out there with a quarterback, yes, you want a star wide receiver, but that center quarterback relationship, probably the most important because you want to be on the same page when you're setting up pass protections, when you're setting up run schemes. That center is the quarterback of the offensive line. So, we've seen Josh Allen has had a lot of weight on some of these decisions, bringing in Joe Brady to be the next head coach. I would imagine Josh Allen is doing everything he can behind closed doors to make sure they keep his center.
And the strength of that, one of the strengths of that team has been the offensive line. So why pick it apart? And they do have an unrestricted free agent left guard, David Edwards, as well. And I think if you had to pick between the two of them, you'd pick McGovern.
All right, so we're making our way down the list. We have 10, we have 9, and now going to number 8, we have John Franklin Myers out of Denver, 29 years old, 14 and a half sacks over the past 2 seasons. So, Pete, what does the market look like for him?
Again, we go back to Seattle, and you look at what they do, getting pressure in the interior, and this is a guy who can push the pocket from the interior, so there's going to be value for him. A lot of teams will look and say, hey, how much is the value? He's 29, okay, so he's still got good years left in him. You can give him a 4-year deal and be okay with it. So I do think there's going to be a relatively hot market for him, and if I were the Broncos, I'd consider keeping him.
I would too. They had the incredible defense last year, which was phenomenal. I think it's similar to the center, and we were talking about interior of the offensive line. They're hard to find. I think it's the same way with the defensive tackle, clogging up that interior of the defensive line as well. I don't think guys like him are sitting around. There's not many available, so I think Denver will bring him back as well.
We've continued sort of the reveal of the top 10s here on HQ with Pete and Danny. And if we get to the edges of the defensive line, we do have a conversation at 7 and 6. Odafe Oweh and Jaelan Phillips coming into the top 10 at edge and defensive end.
Yeah, and Oweh was kind of considered a little bit of a bust when he was with the Ravens, and he goes to the Chargers and has 7.5 sacks and looks like an entirely different guy, and all of a sudden his market has now gone up. And I think teams look at his age, he's 26. There's a real want and a need for guys who have twitch off the edge and can rush the passer. So I think he's going to get more probably money than he probably should get because because of where the market is right now. Phillips is interesting because he played well for the Eagles, didn't get a lot of sacks when he was traded over, and he's had injury history, so you got to be a little bit careful with him.
Yeah, I think so too. I think both of these guys are phenomenal guys that can impact the opposing quarterback. That's something that you obviously want to have. I think it was interesting, Zach Bond, the deal got done before free agency. I wonder if Phillips will do that, but it's only if it's going to be satisfiable to Jaelan Phillips. So he might, if they can't get that done, if he hits it, then he might be gone. I think Philly's been one of the best at managing their roster and not overpaying guys. So I might be more surprised if Jaelan Phillips is back with Philly.
They let him go, though. That leaves that cupboard kind of, I mean, they need guys that can rush the passer.
All right, we've made it finally to the top 5. And for number 5, we're going to Kansas City. Looking at corner, Jaylen Watson, 27 years old. So, Pete, do you see him returning to Kansas City, or what other teams that need some corner help could be in the mix?
Yeah, and this is a guy who had some injury issues and then last year played the whole year and was fantastic and quietly was really good. And I think that's what you're looking for in free agency, is a guy who's ascending. You know, and I think he fits that profile. So teams looking for a good corner are going to actively go after him. So it's going to be tough on the Chiefs. Now, they just freed up all that cap room to make some moves. Obviously, they're probably going to free up some more cap room by getting rid of Jawan Taylor at right tackle. And so I think they will free up more cap room and be able to try and keep him. I think ideal scenario, he goes back to Kansas City.
I think it was one of the bright spots of Kansas City's season was the play of Jaylen Watson. So much attention was in the offense, what's going on there, but he is one of the better lockdown corners on the market. So I think it'll be really interesting to see if can they bring back one of their best players on that side of the ball.
I don't know what the odds preseason over the summer would have been if we said Alec Pierce was going to be top 4 in your free agent list, Pete, but he did have a nice season. This is also just speak to what the market is like here in 2026.
Alec Pierce has gone from better than player on my list to one of the top 5 free agents on the market. How about that, huh? I can spot him. Early on in his career, he was more of a one-trick pony. He was a guy with speed, just go. But last year, he developed into a wide receiver. His route running was really good. He became a much more cognizant of where to run routes and how to beat defenses. And also, he became a good at the 50-50 ball. He's a good receiver who would fit in a lot of places. I'll give you one. Buffalo. If I were the Buffalo Bills, I would do everything in my power to go get Alec Pierce. You imagine putting him out there with that speed, help opening up everything on the middle. And one thing that you keep hearing out of Buffalo, all that talk about running the football, and it's going back to Josh Allen. Joe Brady is going to build that around Josh Allen. You need to get him a number 1 weapon, and Alec Pierce would be great in Buffalo.
I think he'd be phenomenal in Buffalo. I don't know, like, because of the name, it doesn't have the huge brand name equity, but you get a guy with size who can pop the top off a defense. I think Josh Allen would be thrilled if they were able to bring him in here. But what about him staying at where he is? Because he's been one of their favorite targets as well for Daniel Jones. And you mentioned, like, the fact that he actually got the best quarterback play he's been able to play with probably contributed as well. So I'll be curious to know how the Daniel Jones decision impacts potentially Alec Pierce staying.
And what do they do, and what's the mechanism of it? Because you could tag Alec Pierce. There's also the possibility of putting the tag on him and keeping him there. Or what do you do with Michael Pittman? There's talk of trading Michael Pittman or releasing Michael Pittman. So we'll see how that plays out. But I think in their ideal world, he's back with the Colts. But if he hits that market, man, there's going to be a big market for Alec Pierce.
All right, now we've entered the top 3, and Tommy, you alluded to this. You said, hey, a lot of folks have George Pickens as their number 1 free agent that is out there. He is coming in at number 3 here, where we're expecting Dallas to use that tag. Obviously, anything could happen. But, Pete, why is he number 3 for you and not the number 1 guy that's out there?
Well, again, what you said about Alec Pierce a year ago, if you would have said George Pickens would be number 3, would you have bought into that? No, because he was George Pickens. And there's always that factor. There's always something hovering over him. Look, he had a great season last year. He's a great player. George Pickens, the player, might be number 1. But George Pickens, with the other stuff coming with him, drags him down a little bit. And I do think the Cowboys are going to tag him. They should tag him, franchise tag him, keep him there, keep that offense together. So I don't really think he's going to be moved.
I think Jerry Jones has always been one who hasn't hesitated to use the tag if he needs to, and I think he will on George Pickens. I think this locker room was actually playing with a veteran quarterback like Dak Prescott, who talked to his teammates. He's a great veteran, can kind of take a guy like George Pickens, elevate him. Also playing across from CeeDee Lamb helped him a ton, where he didn't have the best matchups every single time. He got some favorable ones and was able to take advantage of them. But I agree with you. I think there's no way he's letting it, that Jerry Jones is going to let him leave Dallas.
But here's the other part of the next chapter. What is he like when you tag him?
Right.
If you franchise tag him and he doesn't get a new contract, what does George Pickens do? Is he happy about it? Is he grumbling? Does he show up? I mean, that's the next chapter.
Every facet of the George Pickens saga is interesting,
amazing.
no matter how you slice it and how it all works out. Now we're down to 2. And if we get to number 2, it's Trey Hendrickson, which, look, I don't think anyone's surprised that he's on this list, Pete, but we talked about tiers, right? We talked about, like, Khalil Mack, Von Miller in the 60s. We talked about Odafe Oweh, Jaelan Phillips at 6 and 7. Is there a clear tier for Trey Hendrickson as your premier pass rusher here at number 2?
When healthy, he's the number 1 pass rusher, and I don't think there's any question about that. Now, he wasn't healthy last year. He had core surgery, which is always a concern. When you get cut in the middle of your stomach, that's always a concern. And so there is issues, but he's also 31 years old. If he was 28, he'd be the number 1 free agent, but he's not. He's 31 years old. So the other part of that, though, is pass rushers like this don't come to the market that often. And that's why I think there's going to be a real market for Trey Hendrickson.
And I also think he's done in Cincinnati, right? I mean, like, it just feels like it was too toxic. Last year got so ugly. I know there's questions about the injury, but I do think he'll be somewhere else. And I think it all comes down to that evaluation. We've talked a lot about it with a lot of these guys in their 30s. How do you feel about him? And the price tag gets really interesting because I think his ceiling is a little bit higher than the guys that are 36, 37, where he could still play. If he is 100%, I think he's going to absolutely break the bank.
And here's something that teams might end up weighing. You have, if the Raiders decide to move Crosby,
Right.
do you give up picks to go get Crosby and then deal with him, or do you just pay Hendrickson rather than give up picks? So I think that could be in play for teams that are looking for pass rush help.
Okay, all right, finally, we have arrived at number 1, Pete Prisco's number 1 free agent that is out there, and we're heading to Baltimore, none other than Tyler Linderbaum. And Pete, you had said, quote, he is the best offensive lineman in this group. It's not even close.
And I don't understand why the Ravens are even allowing him to get to the market. Now, they might not. They might tag him, but it's a pretty expensive tag to put it on him. I wouldn't let him get out there. I think there's so much value. You talked about it at the center position. It's so important nowadays. Look, when you come to the line of scrimmage now, there's so many different looks these teams are throwing in disguises and jumping and moving around that you have to have a center who can identify things. He can do that. He's physical in the run game. He's good in protection. He has great value. And if you can, again, I go back to what I always say, there's only so many people in the world who can play these positions. If you can get one, you go get one.
I think he's one of the better offensive linemen in the NFL,
Yes.
in its entirety, regardless of position. It is a transition period for the Ravens. Like, they're making the big changes. They're bringing in a new coach, new staff. But I still think this is one of the core pieces where you do not want to start over or try to look for another spot to replace Tyler Linderbaum. He is that special. And I think it potentially could hinder Lamar Jackson's development and return. You want to get him back to that MVP-type performance. So I think they'd be insane to let him go. And I think he's back with the Ravens.
It's the first time, I think, in 6 years I haven't had a quarterback at number 1.
Wow.
Yeah.
It shows you how, I mean, and there's no one that would argue against you.
I had Sam Darnold number 1 last year, but because he was a quarterback and the value was. Yeah.
Tricky.
Armstead, that's right. Armstead was the number 1.
Tricky that both in free agency and the draft, the quarterback position not talked about like we usually talk about every single year. DK, Pete, certainly appreciate it. This is a look at the top 10 again from Pete Prisco. You can find the top 100 over at CBSSports.com. And if you like running backs, I heard they're having a conversation with our running back, Damian Harris, later on HQ.
Only 10 days removed from the Super Bowl, but less than 3 weeks to NFL free agency. So we locked Pete Prisco in a room for 48 hours and forced him to rank the top 100 free agents in the NFL.
That's how you get anything done around here. You got to just lock you guys up and make it
48 hours is a lot longer than that, I can promise you.
We're so excited to have you here at CBS Sports HQ. Chris Hassel, Haley Sutton, of course, Pete Prisco, and our quarterback, Danny Kanell. Our producer, Noah, was kind of pushing back against you. You said this is coming a little earlier. Did you do this list a little earlier?
Last year I did it a week earlier. So, because certain bosses, which Noah is not one, asked me to do it early. So
you just go when they tell you to go.
Yes, exactly right.
Well, let's look at the top 10. You will not see a quarterback ranked in Pete Prisco's top 10. Going with someone who snaps the ball to a quarterback, Lamar Jackson at number 1 and Tyler Linderbaum. Then it's Trey Hendrickson at number 2, followed by a couple of wide receivers in George Pickens and Alec Pierce. Pierce, an interesting one because Daniel Jones, who's the top-ranked quarterback, along with Pierce, eligible for that franchise tag, and the Colts have to decide between one of those two. And then just 4 quarterbacks total in the top 100 free agents. Wow. Malik Willis up there at 31. That's a little higher than I thought he would be for you.
Well, it's based on him being one of the wanted guys. And do I necessarily think he's a great quarterback? No. But I understand in this market there's not a lot there, and he's going to be one of the guys that teams go after. It's probably a knee-jerk reaction to last year. He played better. I give him credit. He was improved. He threw the ball better than he had before. But I think we're kind of rushing the process a little bit on him. But that's what happens when you're quarterback starved, you're quarterback needy, you panic. And somebody's going to panic, I think, and pay him a little bit more than what I would pay him.
This is an absolutely awful year to be in the market for a quarterback because the draft is probably one of the worst draft class of quarterbacks that we've seen, and the free agency class, as we've seen there, is not exactly talent rich. So you will see teams, for the couple that are up here, like a Malik Willis, I think you'll see teams overpay because you get desperate. You don't want to throw away a whole season. And I think Malik Willis is probably the luckiest guy about the timing of when he's available right now with not much competition. I think he's probably going to get overpaid.
In fact, if Jordan Love doesn't get hurt, is he even this high on the list? Yeah. Is he even wanted as a quarterback? And so sometimes somebody's misfortune is your good fortune, and that's kind of worked out for Malik Willis.
Who do you think he ends up with?
Well, I think you got to look at the Dolphins. I think when you look at, their GM came from Green Bay, their coach came from Green Bay. They're going to get rid of Tua. Obviously, he's not the answer. Personally, if I were the Miami Dolphins, I'd be patient. I wouldn't do it. I would sit there, I'd play with Quinn Ewers, and I'd go into next year's draft class, which is absolutely loaded with quarterbacks, and I would take my chances that I'd get one that way. I would not panic and pay Malik Willis to come be my quarterback.
The only thing I would say about next year's loaded class, we say that a lot.
Yeah,
and I don't know if it is.
Say.
Like, I do think Arch, I'm a believer in Arch.
Dante Moore?
He's like, I think there's a reason he came back, because maybe his draft evaluation wasn't that strong. He
got the
needs
kid
to
at
play
US,
a lot
got the
better.
kid at USC, you got the kid at
good. But like a lot of the lists, it's like, oh, Lenore Sellers and DJ Lagway and these guys that look really good in the combine, but they don't actually play that good yet.
Yeah.
It could be an insane class, but there's also a risk that you run in if they don't pan out.
And the other part of that equation is, okay, everybody's going to sit there and say, look what Seattle did. They won a Super Bowl with defense, and Sam Darnold not doing a whole hell of a lot in the postseason. So you could get a quarterback and then build around the quarterback.
I would say this, too, because I know that the Sam Darnold comp is going to be out. Like, it's very popular.
Yeah.
People, who's the next Sam Darnold? Like, is Malik Willis it? Sam Darnold played a lot of football, and granted, some of it wasn't very good, but you learn a lot, and he was able to learn from those experiences and grow from them and eliminate some of the mistakes that he's made. Malik Willis has not played very much football at all. I think he has 1,300 total yards passing. Like, that is not a great window. So I still think there's a lot of risk in Malik Willis because he still has to learn. So he's very much not a finished product. Sam Darnold wasn't either, but he at least had a lot of experience, something Malik Willis doesn't.
And to that point, it wasn't overnight for Sam Darnold, too. Like, I think it's the flashy thing to talk about right now, but we were even up into the Super Bowl, we were talking about, is Sam Darnold going to be Sam Darnold? So it'll be interesting there. I do want to talk about your highest rated quarterback on this list, Pete, and that, of course, is Daniel Jones. I know he didn't make the playoffs. The Colts kind of fell off there, but he was dealing with so many injuries. Did he give you more confidence that after what you saw from him that he could repeat that next year? What are the conversations like when it comes to his deal?
I think we got to put the health thing aside because you think he's going to come back from that. Look, he had a broken leg and he had a torn Achilles, and he should come back. And even if he's not quite the runner he once was because of the Achilles injury, he can still throw the football. So I think ideal scenario for him and for the Colts is to go back. And I think they'll figure out a way to get him to go back. I think he liked it there. I think he liked the staff. And I think it makes sense. There is one thing out there, though. Remember, the Vikings were in play for him last year. He was on their team, and they were interested in bringing him back, and somehow he decided to go end up with the Colts. And the Vikings now are searching for a quarterback, or at least a veteran quarterback, to come in and compete with J.J. McCarthy.
That does give Daniel Jones some leverage, I think, in this negotiation. I think ideally you'd want to be back with Jonathan Taylor, with that run game. Before he got hurt and before his body started to deteriorate, he was in the MVP conversation. I mean, he was having a fantastic year, and the Colts were at the top of the division, and it looked like this would be one of those stories. I mean, for a while, it was like we thought Daniel Jones might have the Sam Darnold type of season. Like, could this be this unbelievable turnaround? I think he'd probably be smart to go there. I wonder if there's some loyalty because Indianapolis did give him a chance to start again because he did have that success. I think it's the best fit for him. I know there's still some question marks because even during the season, I remember talking to you on the Sunday Night Show, and Haley, you as well. Like, are we really bought in? Can Daniel Jones really do this over the course of the season? And there were a couple bad games in there when they did take away Jonathan Taylor and he got a little bit more pressure. But again, I think a lot of this comes back to, well, who else are you going to get if you're the Colts? And they're not going back to Anthony Richardson. So, like, there's not a lot of great options. So I do think the Colts will probably pony up for Daniel Jones.
By the way, somebody tell Daniel Jones you can't spend loyalty later on in life.
That is true.
Don't be loyal.
So what about Aaron Rodgers then, Pete Prisco? Because obviously here we are again looking at the Steelers waiting to decide what they're going to do at quarterback. You saw what he was capable of last year. Is this a situation where we're waiting on him to be the guy in Pittsburgh again?
You look at Aaron Rodgers, by the way, I would say this because Aaron Rodgers is a better quarterback than Malik Willis. But when you look at it from a free agency lens, it's different because one's younger, you can get long-term deal out of him, and that's why I ranked him ahead of him. But if you ask me right now, if I had to play a game tomorrow afternoon, would it be Aaron Rodgers or Malik Willis? It would be Aaron Rodgers.
Would it be Aaron Rodgers or Daniel Jones?
It would probably be Aaron Rodgers. But again, age is a factor, and he's probably only going to play one more year. And I think he's going to go back to Pittsburgh. I really do. Mike McCarthy and Aaron Rodgers, they had a good relationship when they were in Green Bay. You hire Mike McCarthy. He's a Pittsburgh guy. He loves being there. And I think bringing Aaron Rodgers back makes sense for them. He had a pretty good year last year. They just need help. They need to get him some more weapons on the outside, open up the passing game a little bit, run the ball a little bit better. Gainwell did some nice things, and he's a free agent, but they need to run the ball better, and I think that'll help open up the offense. I think he goes back to Pittsburgh.
I think Pittsburgh got exactly what they thought they were going to get out of Aaron Rodgers. 24 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, consistent QB play. I know there was a couple stinkers in there for Aaron Rodgers, but I do think like the floor of Aaron Rodgers, there's not much risk. You know what you're going to get. They made the playoffs, and I thought the offensive line got exposed somewhat against the Texans, but a lot of people got exposed by the Texans. I think that becomes the most critical component is I do think he goes back to Pittsburgh, so when he does, get him the help that he needs. Get him a little bit better offensive line play, get him another receiver to work with on the outside, and then you hope to run it back. And I do think this is probably a slim window. But again, this class, I think you're Aaron Rodgers for 1 year we'd take all day over some of these other guys that you would have to sign for multiple years. So I think this is the best case for both of them.
They have the 21st pick in the NFL draft, but there might not be a second quarterback that goes off the board in the first round of the NFL draft.
The Simpson kid from Alabama will go for
We've seen some mock drafts where he goes in the first round.
He got hurt last year, and I think the scouts and personnel people all know that. I think he goes in the first round.
Well, Aaron Rodgers helped his team make the playoffs on a one-year deal. It's the 4th straight year we've seen a quarterback on a one-year deal lead their respective team to the postseason.